On today's episode of 48 Hours Mystery, we dive into the story of Brigitte Macron, the current First Lady of France. Social media is ablaze with rumors that not only is Brigitte Macron a man, that she is married to their own son, President of France Emmanuel Macron. Online sleuths point to the fact that Brigitte walks like a man, sits like a man, has the waist to hip ratio of a man, no lady bumps to speak of, only man bumps that occasionally poke through in the front. This video has been circulating all over social media, sending the world in a tizzy.
Vous aussi, vous avez été victime des réseaux sociaux. Récemment, on a dit que vous étiez un homme sur les réseaux sociaux. D'abord, ça vous a blessé, ça?
C'est-à-dire au début, j'ai regardé ça d'un petit peu loin.
So what is the truth? Is the First Lady of France really a man named Jean-Michel? No. Stay tuned to the end of the episode where we uncover the mystery. Hello everyone, if you're a new viewer, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. If this is your second, third, fourth time watching one of my videos and you're not yet subscribed, we already go together. Okay, make it official and hit that subscribe button. So we're all gathered here today because Candace Owens accused Brigitte Macron of being born a man. This story has been circulating all over France for years now, but we here in the English-speaking world only recently became aware of it because of Candace Owens. She has bet her whole professional career that Brigitte Macron was born a man.
I would stake my entire professional career on the fact that Brigitte Macron, the current First Lady of France, was born a man.
Now I have to say, I watched Candace Owens' series. I read the book front to back, Becoming Brigitte. And I must say, after all of the information that I gathered, I did some additional research online. And after all of the information that I gathered, I have to say that I disagree. Brigitte Macron was not born a man. Brigitte Macron was born a boy and is a man.
Got him!
Allegedly, if I were an employee of the Élysée Palace, now the Élysée Palace, for those of you who are not familiar, is the equivalent of the White House in America. So if I were an employee of the Élysée Palace, I would do anything I could to get my hands on a fork, a toothbrush, a spoon, a cup, I would say a brush or a comb, but she wears wigs, but anything else, okay, that would have her DNA on it, and I would take it and I would sell it to the press, okay, so they can do DNA testing and determine if Brigitte Macron is actually a woman. This whole story could be solved if someone at the Élysée Palace just had enough conviction. Who's gonna be the brave soul to step up and steal a used cup from Brigitte? Anyways, I did my part, okay? I put it out there. Now it's up to someone to go ahead and do it. In this video, we are going to be going down the Brigitte rabbit hole. As I said, I watched the Candace Owens series. I read Xavier Poussard's book. And I have a lot to say. I also have a second video which focuses on Emmanuel Macron. And if you would like me to do a third video, which will focus on all of the PDF files in their social circle, let me know in the comment section down below. Comment third video, and if enough people comment, then I will make that third video for you guys. Now, the rumor is that Brigitte Macron is actually Jean-Michel Trogneau. And when I was doing my research into Jean-Michel Trogneau, I realized that he and I do have one thing in common. He couldn't commit to being a man, and I can't commit to a fragrance, and that is why I use Scentbird. Scentbird gives me the luxury of experimenting with high-end fragrances without committing to an entire bottle. So I get to smell like $1 million without breaking the bank. Lately, I've been sniffing my way through some new scents. This perfume has bergamot, pear, and gardenia, giving it a nice floral smell with a hint of sweetness, making it perfect for everyday wear. On the flip side, there's Bombshell by Victoria's Secret. This perfume has purple passion fruit, Shangri-La peony, and vanilla orchid, giving it a very bold smell that's perfect for a romantic date. If you love trying new perfumes but don't want to commit to a full bottle because who finishes those anyways, let me put you on to Scentbird. You get a 30-day supply of designer scents every month so you can smell rich without spending rich. Use promo code NissCee55 to get 55% off your first month. That is less than $8 to start your own fragrance wardrobe. Smell good, spend less, win-win. So tell me, what's your scent story going to be? Brigitte Macron, maiden name Brigitte Trogneau, was born April 13, 1953 in Amiens, France, to a wealthy family of chocolatiers, and the family business still exists in Amiens today. Brigitte is the youngest child with 5 older siblings. However, if the speculation is true and Brigitte is actually Jean-Michel Trogneau, That would make this individual the second youngest child, and their date of birth would be February 11th, 1945, which would make Brigitte 80 years old instead of 71 years old. Does this person look 80 years old or 71 years old? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Brigitte has been very secretive about she's past. Brigitte has used the police to intimidate journalists who were investigating her backstory. She has instructed anyone who knows her from her past to not speak to the press. She has had tons of information removed from the internet that relates to her and her relatives and associates, and she has been very selective with the photos that she has made public. One of the photos that she did release is this family photo where we were told she is the child sitting in the mother's lap. However, only smooth-brained people believe that because there is more of a resemblance between Brigitte and the young boy, Jean-Michel Trogneau, the brother that for years Brigitte tried to hide by not including him on her Wikipedia page, by excluding him from her genealogy tree in online databases until she finally had to acknowledge his existence, him, Jean-Michel Trogneau, or rather Brigitte's true identity. Just saying, but back to the family photo. Brigitte's people have very clearly manipulated this photo. For example, the youngest child's face is very washed out compared to everyone else's. I wonder if that was done intentionally to obscure the fact that this child doesn't resemble Brigitte. Also, the young girl on the right, her hand appears to have fingers missing. It has been said that photoshopping hands is difficult, which could be why her hands look like that. Perhaps someone edited her in the photo, and the shadows are also inconsistent. Look at the shadows behind each person. The mom's shadow is visible. The older siblings all have their shadows visible on both the left side and right side of their head. The father has a shadow that is visible behind his head. The little girl, it's a little harder to tell, but look at Jean-Michel Trogneau. There's no visible shadow on the left side of his head. Now, compare that to the lampshade behind him and to the other siblings. I believe that his shadow was removed in an effort to not draw attention to him. And in another version of the photo, which was released by the Élysée Palace, they decided to remove the lamp altogether, once again in an effort to not draw attention to him. Also, the little boy's teeth seem to be manipulated. Keep in mind, this photo is an official release from Brigitte's team. However, investigative journalists suspected that Brigitte is lying about her true identity, and so they researched her family independently, and they independently found these photos of Jean-Michel Trogneau from his time in elementary school. We see that Jean-Michel Trogneau doesn't have straight teeth. However, in the family photo, someone gave him straight teeth. Why? I think the reason is pretty obvious. When Brigitte was a teacher in the late 80s, there are photos of her and her teeth are not straight. These teeth are more consistent with Jean-Michel's natural teeth. This is evidence that they are the same person, and so in an effort to erase the resemblance, she had his teeth straightened in the photo that was released by her PR team. More evidence that they tried to hide Jean-Michel Trogneau is this picture that was published in a French magazine called VSD, and they included that family photo. However, Jean-Michel Trogneau wasn't there at all because he had been cropped out. That's disrespect. And in his place, they included this photo claiming to be Brigitte at her communion. Some people have argued that the little girl in this photo has more of a resemblance to Brigitte's daughter, Tiffaine, rather than Brigitte. However, I disagree. I do believe this person in the communion photo is Brigitte Trogneau, the real Brigitte Trogneau.
I repeat, will the real
Brigitte Trogneau.
please stand up?
But let's continue on with the official timeline before I tell you my theory on all of this. Brigitte Macron had an older sibling named Marie-Yvonne Trogneau who died in a car crash. In an interview with Elle magazine, Brigitte said this, quote, "My older sister was killed in a car accident, along with her husband and the child she was carrying. I was 8 years old. She's with me every day of my life. A year later, one of my 6-year-old nieces passed away." Brigitte explicitly said she was 8 years old when her older sister passed away. However, according to Brigitte's date of birth of April 13th, 1953, and Marie-Yvonne's date of death, February 24th, 1960, Brigitte would have been 6 years old and not 8. Also, she said one of her nieces passed away a year later, and that niece was 6 years old when they died. She did have a niece that died when they were 6 years old. However, their death happened 6 years after Mary Vaughn's car crash, not 1 year, as Brigitte had said in the interview to Elle magazine. These false statements could be taken as a mistake, or it could be taken as misdirection. Now, personally, I think it's the latter because she does this a lot. When retelling stories from her past, she gives incorrect information, and it seems as though she does it on purpose. We do know that Brigitte got her high school degree in 1972, and in 1974, she married André Louis Ozier, and her brother, Jean-Michel was the best man at her wedding, and she was a witness at his wedding in 1980. So, the two were very close. However, no photos of him at her wedding have ever been made public, and vice versa. Brigitte and André went on to have 3 children, Sebastian, Laurence, and Tiffany. However, no pictures of Brigitte pregnant have ever been made public, or pictures of her as a young mother. Nothing exists. The one picture we do have is from her wedding to André Ozier, and Xavier Poussard has authenticated this photo by cross-referencing wedding announcements from that time, so we know Brigitte Trogneau and André Ozier did get married, and they are both real people. But is the First Lady in this photo? Well, there's an interesting story surrounding this photo. Many people who defend the accusations of Brigitte Macron being a man like to bring up the fact that Natasha Ray and Amandine Roy were found guilty of defamation after being the first people to publicly accuse Brigitte Macron of being a man. However, they were not found guilty of defaming Brigitte Macron. Let's go back to the wedding photo. In this photo, the bride is Brigitte Trogneau and the groom is André Ozier. Natasha Ray made the accusation that the groom is not André Ozier. She believed André didn't even exist, and instead she said that this man is Jean-Louis Ozier. She also alleged that Brigitte's 3 children were mothered by Jean-Louis's wife, Catherine Audoy, not the First Lady Brigitte. And so that was the basis of the defamation lawsuit. Catherine Audoy says she has never had any children, and that has been proven to be true. And Jean-Louis says he's not the groom in the wedding photo. The groom in the wedding photo is his nephew, André Ozier. Furthermore, he was in attendance at this wedding, and he provided photos to confirm that they are indeed 2 people. The actual groom in the photo, André Ozier, didn't attend the defamation trial as he was deceased at the time of the trial. To prove he was a real person, they provided this death announcement, which features a photo of him in a bathing suit. A strange choice. Usually you choose a more professional photo when you're trying to memorialize a loved one at a funeral service, but apparently all other pictures of him had been destroyed, so this was the only one they had. And in fact, when a documentary was made about Brigitte, they used a photo that was supposedly her ex-husband André Ozier, but that was later debunked to be a former colleague of Brigitte named Mr. Hugo. He should have sued Brigitte for defamation. Like I said, the 2 ladies were found guilty of defamation because their statements about Catherine Audoy and Jean-Louis Ozier were proven to be false, but those had nothing to do with Brigitte Macron. But one curious thing did come out of this trial. During the proceedings, Brigitte Macron had promised to certify in writing that the bride in the photo was her. However, she never did. She had a cousin of the deceased, André Ozier, certify in writing that it was her. She had someone else do it. That way she couldn't be found guilty of perjury.
That's suspicious.
I don't believe the First Lady is the woman in this photo. Here is a picture of Brigitte Macron as a teacher, and look at this wedding photo. They don't have the same teeth. It's not possible that these are the same people. And when you compare the wedding photo to the communion photo, there is a strong resemblance between the 2 people. So I do believe that these 2 people are the same. However, I don't believe it's Brigitte Macron. And as far as the deceased André Ozier goes, the timing of his death is very interesting. Sylvie Bromel is an investigative journalist, and she published a biography about Brigitte. And in her research, she found inconsistencies, and she too began to question Brigitte's real identity. And 6 months after she published her book, André Ozier was declared deceased.
That's weird.
And there have been some inconsistencies in the reporting surrounding his death. André Ozier died on December 24th, 2019, and was cremated on December 28th, 2019. However, his daughter Tiffany told Paris Match magazine that he was buried on December 24th, 2019. This is false. André Ozier was not buried at all. He was cremated, and Tiffany knows this because she officiated his funeral service. She knows he was cremated. This is a common theme with the Macron family, giving incorrect information seemingly on purpose. But let's put Brigitte and Andre aside for a moment and talk about Jean-Michel. Xavier Poussard was able to track Jean-Michel's history as an elementary school student in Amiens up until the age of 11. At that point, the records stop. Xavier learns from an old classmate that Jean-Michel was a disruptive student and his parents had to withdraw him. The next record of Jean-Michel that Xavier Poussard was able to locate is Jean-Michel in Algeria. The day after Jean-Michel turned 18 years old, his father registered him for military service, and the address was in Algiers, Algeria. Brigitte has told the media that she has fond memories of Algiers, Algeria. She says her father was a teacher there. She says she studied contemporary literature, and her family lived close to the university. She says she has a great aunt who studied in Algiers. She speaks very fondly of her time in Algiers, Algeria. However, journalists have not been able to substantiate those statements about Brigitte in Algiers. However, there is record of Jean-Michel in Algiers. After turning 18, Jean-Michel returned to Paris and enrolled in an engineering program in university. However, he often skipped class, received mediocre grades, and he never graduated from his program. And this is his class photo from his time in university. That's Jean-Michel on the right and Brigitte on the left. Or should I say, that's Jean-Michel in both photos. He's just changed his name and put on a wig, allegedly. In 1974, Jean-Michel's father opened Bacardi Metal, and Jean-Michel was listed as the director of the company, and he worked in the shop as a manager. A few years later, in 1977, a transsexual man goes on a TV show and says he goes by the name Veronique. It has been speculated that this so-called Veronique is really Jean-Michel, or should I say Brigitte. Audio software has verified the voices to be from the same individual, just at different ages, because as we age, our voices change over time. But I will let you guys compare.
En l'occurrence moi, est déjà préparé ce genre de mutation par nécessité, en ce sens qu'on se sent femme et on régularise une situation sans plus.
24, c'est que c'est nos limites. C'est-à-dire, on ne sait pas jusqu'où ça va, c'est bien au-delà, donc des choses que vous ne feriez pas dans la vie réelle.
In the interview, the host asked this, quote, "Sir, you are completely a woman? How long ago did you have the operation?" And the person responds, "I don't really like the words completely a woman. In other words, we become a kind of woman. You can copulate but cannot procreate. Hence, the legal problems we'll be talking about later. In other words, integration goes smoothly on an individual level. They only exist on a social level." So the guest never answers the question about having the surgery. The host asks them twice, and both times they avoid answering, which leaves me to assume they didn't have the surgery. The guest also went on to say this, quote, "For civil status purposes, it is possible to change your first name to an ambiguous one. This is very important because it enables integration or pseudo-integration into society, in the sense that there are always problems, but they can be solved administratively, i.e. by mutual agreement, but legally there is no solution." So the guest is saying that at the time, only social transition was legal, which is true. Back in 1977, in France, the courts did allow transgender individuals to legally change their name, although it was a complicated and drawn-out process that required approval from the courts. And at the time, that was the only legal remedy. In 1977, they did not legally allow people to change their sex in France. It didn't become legal until 1992, coincidentally, the year after Emmanuel Macron started his secret relationship with Brigitte. But remember that piece of information that the guest on the show was making mention of the fact that they are not able to legally change their sex. The guest also mentions that he's a craftsman, which lines up with Jean-Michel being a manager at a metal shop. And the guest mentions living with a woman in a relationship similar to that of George Sand and Chopin. George Sand was a female who adopted the name George Sand and lived her life passing as a man, and she had a 9-year tumultuous relationship with Chopin, who was a man. So just to reiterate, this man, who is believed to be Jean-Michel Trogneau, goes on a show, talks about living as a woman in a relationship with a woman, and he calls himself Veronique while he is on the show. Well, 3 years later, Jean-Michel Trogneau went on to marry a woman named Veronique Drew, and his sister Brigitte Trogneau, or I guess Brigitte Ozier at the time, was a witness at the wedding. This newlywed couple of Jean-Michel Trogneau and Veronique Drew lived in a town just outside of Amiens, and they ended up having 2 children, a boy and a girl, and the boy, Jean-Jacques Trogneau, shares a very strong resemblance to Emmanuel Macron, which I address in my Emmanuel video, so make sure you check that out after this. But like I said, Jean-Michel and Veronique had 2 children. There are no photos available from the wedding, no photos of Veronique pregnant, no photos of Veronique and Jean-Michel with the children. There's just no photos, okay? None. Nothing. It's all been suppressed by Brigitte Macron, and I bet if we were to see the wedding photos that we would see 2 individuals who both look like women, but we don't have those, so we don't know. Xavier Poussard spoke to Veronique Drew, and she confirmed that yes, she does have pictures of Jean-Michel Trogneau and of his sister Brigitte, but she refuses to release them. She defers to Brigitte on the matter. In 1987, Veronique Drew and Jean-Michel divorced, and in an interview with Xavier Poussard, Veronique said that after the divorce, she went to live with her mom, which Xavier later confirmed was a lie. She lived in a property owned by Jean-Michel's father, and that's where things go cold. Meanwhile, over in Lille, Brigitte Ozier is living the married life with her husband. She was a mother of 2 children, Sebastian, who at the time was 7, and Laurence, who at the time was 5. And she was working as a press officer at the Nord-Pas-de-Calais Chamber of Commerce. And in 1984, she had her 3rd child, Tiffaine. And here is where I believe the switch happened. Here's my theory on how Jean-Michel came to become Brigitte Macron. Jean-Michel is impersonating Brigitte. Brigitte is a real person. That is Brigitte on her mother's lap, and I believe that is Brigitte in the communion photo, and she did marry Andre Ozier, and she gave birth to 3 children, the last child being born on January 30th, 1984. I believe during or shortly after the birth of the youngest child, the real Brigitte Ozier passed away in 1984. Brigitte and her brother Jean-Michel were very close. They were the closest in age. He was a witness at her wedding, and he was the best man at her wedding. She was also a witness at his wedding. They lived very close to each other, and I believe that they had a very close relationship, and perhaps it was in her wishes that in the event something happened to her, her brother be the one to handle her affairs. And being someone who had the desire to live as a woman, I believe Jean-Michel Trogneau seized the opportunity to not legally declare Brigitte deceased and to instead steal her identity. At the time, he wasn't allowed to change his legal sex, and changing his name was possible, but not easy. So this was a quick fix. Just become Brigitte. And perhaps there was enough resemblance between Jean-Michel and Brigitte that he could use her identity. If we are to believe that that person in that 1977 video is him, in his own words, he was living as a woman at that time. He was passing as a woman. I suspect he left Veronique and began living as Brigitte in 1984. His divorce to Veronique didn't happen until 1987, so I believe that he was impersonating his sister while still legally married to Veronique, and this might be why Jean-Michel's father allowed Veronique to live in one of his properties. That was his way of buying her silence about what his son was up to. Another reason I believe my theory is plausible is because the random career change. Like I said, in 1982, the person who I believe is the real Brigitte worked at the Nord-Pas-de-Calais Chamber of Commerce as a press secretary, and this job was in Lille, France. That's the name of the town. Lille. In 1984, she gives birth to Tiffaine Ozier in Lille, the town Lille. And despite being a new mother to 3 children, she has 2 children already who are very young. She supposedly, in 1984, moved all the way to Strasbourg, which was 6 hours away from where she was previously living. And she supposedly moved all the way over there despite just having a child and became a teacher. She went from being a press secretary in Lille to being a teacher in Strasbourg 6 hours away after she just had a child and she has 2 other children. It just doesn't make sense. I believe she died and Jean-Michel stole her identity, and he was the one that was the teacher in Strasbourg. And like I said, this school was 6 hours away from where Brigitte was living, and it was also 6 hours away from where he was previously living with his ex-wife. So he would be far away from anyone who might recognize him. Also, there are no available records of Brigitte even having the necessary credentials to be a secondary school teacher. Her autobiography says that she has a CAPES diploma. Now, this diploma is necessary to be a secondary school teacher in France. However, investigative journalists have not been able to substantiate that it exists. So maybe when Jean-Michel stole Brigitte's identity, he falsified documents to get a teaching job all the way in Strasbourg. This is all speculation, okay? I believe that initially Andre Ozier and the rest of the family weren't aware Jean-Michel stole Brigitte's identity, but at some point the family did become aware of it. And I think they bought Veronique's silence by giving her property to live in. And who knows what else they may have given her. And for whatever reason, the family decided to keep the secret. Like maybe they felt sorry for Jean-Michel. Like when we look at photos of him in school when he was little, he stands out because he always looks awkward compared to his classmates. And apparently he was taken out of school because he had behavioral problems. He struggled in university and he flunked out. And maybe this was the first time in his life that he was thriving. And maybe the family not wanting to take that away from him, out of compassion, they allowed him to keep living as Brigitte and they vowed to keep the secret. Who knows? I'm speculating, like I said. In 1991, Jean-Michel, still living as Brigitte, in my theory, gets his teeth straightened and he moves back to Amiens, where he takes on the role of a mother figure to the children who are technically his nieces and nephews. He gets a job at La Providence and then begins an affair with Emmanuel Macron. Andre Ozier likely leaves Jean-Michel and the Trogneau family to raise the kids. He fades into obscurity while Brigitte is discovered to be having this affair with the teenage Emmanuel Macron, and the rest is history. I have wrapped my brain around this so many times. I've read all the theories online, and to me this is what makes the most sense. She wants us to believe that the real reason why we don't see the real Jean-Michel in public is because he's chubby. When Emmanuel Macron won re-election, the entire family was there to celebrate. All of them. And they were all standing together. And one by one, he and Brigitte gave hugs and kisses to each family member. But you know who wasn't standing with the family? This so-called Jean-Michel. He was off in the corner, standing with a Rothschild, instead of standing with the rest of the so-called family. And when Brigitte approached his area, she ignored him. The man who is supposedly her brother, the man who was the best man at her wedding, and she was a witness at his wedding, she completely ignored him. And she tells the media he's in hiding because he's fat. Really? Not that he has a health condition, or he's just very private, or that, you know, he has social anxiety. Like, there's so many excuses, and they say he's hiding because he's fat. You talk about your family like that? Furthermore, one of the most reliable ways to confirm someone's identity is their ears. Ears stay pretty consistent with age. Look at this chubby guy's ear next to Jean-Michel Trogneau, and look at Brigitte's ear next to Jean-Michel Trogneau. Anyways, this concludes our episode of 48 Hours Mystery. What are your thoughts on the saga of Jean-Michel Trogneau and Brigitte Trogneau? I want to know, do you guys think that my theory makes sense? I think it makes sense. If you like this video, please don't forget to hit the like button, and don't forget to check out the sponsor of today's video, Scentbird. A special thanks to all of you who have been supporting my channel, who have been supporting me on Patreon. If you like this video, don't forget to check out the video on Emmanuel Macron. I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye.